KOC had the Pistons drafting Brandon Miller. The pro comp is really interesting. Paul George and Trey Murphy III. I haven't watched a lot of Trey Murphy. I saw him in the dunk contest. I've seen a few highlights. You think that's pretty correct, Paul George and Trey Murphy?
I see more Danny Granger, but I could see where Kevin O'Connor says Trey Murphy and Paul George. I love the comp to Paul George, though. When you watch Brandon Miller play, you kind of see why a lot of, draft analysts and experts have him top 3. Just because he can do so much stuff on the basketball court at that forward position that it's elite. Like, if he just puts it all together, man, like he could be one of those small forwards that we look back where we'd be like, how did Brandon Miller fall to 3? Because he's just that talented, man. Like, being able to shoot at a high volume from 3. His handle has gotten a lot better. His playmaking has got a lot better as of late. Like, that was actually a weakness a few months ago. It's actually a strength now. I'm not going to say he's like a lockdown defender, but he's above average. He's just a guy that I want a lot, but I'm not going to say I want him over Victor Wembanyama because I don't. That would be foolish. I think everybody wants Victor. Between Pistons, Rockets fans, and Spurs fans, we all want Victor. But there's a conversation right now among Pistons fans. Who do you want, Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson?
So do you think it's fair that all of the big media outlets are picking Brandon Miller to go to Detroit? Well, at least it seems that way.
I think it's just because of fit. And I think a lot of media companies, whether it's Yahoo, ESPN, whatever, they're like, well, Detroit has Killian Hayes, Jaden Ivey, Cade Cunningham, Scoot Henderson. They're labeling as this generational type point guard. The Pistons could draft him. Let's say they do get the 2nd overall pick. I think most Pistons fans wouldn't be mad because some people are comping this guy to Russell Westbrook, Derrick Rose, John Morant. Oh, explosive point guards. But there are other, media outlets that's saying, Brandon Miller fits like a glove for the Pistons. And I can completely understand why that they want Brandon Miller in Detroit.
Yeah, it's like I've already talked about it on this podcast before. With everything still going on with his personal issues, it's hard for me. But I mean, he's a very talented player. If I could look past all that, he's a very good basketball player. And he fits right in. Like, you could just see him making a cut off the wing and Cade or Ivy feeding him, and he just throws it down or makes another secondary pass to someone else, or he just, they put him on an island and he can go one-on-one. You could just see all that. Yeah, Brandon Miller, he would definitely be the pick. I just think it makes the most sense at 2. I did not agree with Sam Vecini. We'll get into that in a little bit, but
for sure.
Yeah, I think Brandon Miller, if everything's good off the court, he's the guy for the Pistons, whether it's 2 or 3.
I think one thing that I take a lot of stock in is Alabama being such a high-ranked team.
Yeah.
And going into March Madness. I think that matters. I'm not taking anything away from the G League because I think the G League has a lot of NBAers. Obviously, I do cover a lot of G League games, but I just think what Brandon Miller is doing is so special. And I said last week, I wouldn't be surprised come, draft time, that we start hearing Brandon Miller could be the 2nd best player out of this draft class. Some people might kind of look at Scoot Henderson's numbers and saying, he's not that efficient from 3. He might be the 3rd best prospect out of this draft class. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I could see it kind of being like a Jabari Smith type of thing where, last year everyone's like, Jabari's the best player out of this draft class. Jabari should go 1, and then he falls to 3. You never really know what happens, during the NBA draft, and that could possibly happen. I don't know. I still think Scoot is the 2nd best player out of this draft class, but I think Brandon Miller, fit-wise, makes the most sense for the Pistons. But you always do draft best player available in this situation.
What about this, though? Brandon Miller at 2, regardless if the Pistons are drafting there or not. Can you see another team taking him that high? Are we talking about him? Is the conversation Brandon Miller at number 2 for everybody, or just at number 2 because the Detroit Pistons are drafting at number 2?
I think it's dependent on who is the second team in the draft lottery.
Yeah.
But if the Pistons are at 2, there's a real conversation of drafting Brandon Miller over Scoot. I mean, it's a discussion. I don't know if they would do it. I think everything we know about Troy Weaver, he always talks about getting the person right, the player right.
Yep.
And I hate to say it, but people kind of bring up like the off the court stuff, even though legally he's fine. Like he's a free man as of right now. The draft was tomorrow, he'd be getting drafted.
Yeah.
We have to wait and see what happens with all the legal stuff. But as of right now, he's a free man. I still think they draft Scoot at 2. I do.
Ooh, okay.
But man, it could be a situation where they draft Scoot, doesn't work out, and Brandon Miller's balling, and Pistons fans are getting PTSD all over again.
I mean, it might be one of those things too where Brandon Miller, if it does go that way, let's just say they draft Scoot, but for somehow it works between him, Ivy, and Cade. Maybe they don't put up crazy individual numbers, but they win, and Brandon Miller's putting up crazy numbers. Whatever. Who cares if he's putting up great numbers on another team and if we're still winning in Detroit? But I don't know, man. I don't know if I see Troy Weaver going a guard for 4 years in a row, though. That would be tough.
Man. It's because then you get into the conversation of, do you trade Ivy?
Yep.
Because I saw a comment the other day, and it was like, well, in OKC, James Harden came off the bench, right?
Yeah.
Well, they had Russell Westbrook and KD. I think the biggest difference between that and what the Pistons have is the Pistons are loaded at guard. OKC wasn't really, stacked at the guard position at the time when, they were all young. I think that's the biggest difference, but I don't know, man. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting. I either want the first overall pick or the third overall pick. I don't want the second overall pick.
Yeah, the second overall pick it's so nerve-wracking. Yeah, but in Oklahoma City too, they had Thabo Sefolosha. I mean, you had to start him over James Harden. But I always thought Oklahoma City had it right. James Harden made the most sense between Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook because he can control the pace and he had good vision. He knew how to keep guys involved and he knew how to ride the hot hand. I always loved James Harden as that facilitator and lead guard for him. It just didn't work out in Oklahoma City because they didn't want to negotiate contracts with him. But I mean, I don't see Ivy working as a sixth man. I don't think that's his role in the NBA. I don't think it's Scoots. I mean, I think Cade has the personality where if you told him, hey, man, we're going to need you to come off the bench, the team will win a championship, he'd probably do it. But I don't see him doing that in Detroit. So if you draft Scoot, you're saying you're probably looking at some point trading Jaden Ivey because I don't know how it works between all three of those guys. And then with everybody else on this team, all these other young players still developing, we don't know what we got in those guys. Because it seems like Bagley and James Wiseman, they're offensive machines. You can't have so many offensive players. Someone's got to do something.
Yeah, I think that's why you see so many media outlets, mocking Brandon Miller in every mock, whether the Pistons are at 3 or 2, just because fit-wise it makes the most sense. Brandon Miller doesn't need the ball in his hands to be effective. Scoot Henderson is a ball-dominant guard. Jaden Ivey's a ball-dominant guard. Cade Cunningham is a ball-dominant forward. There's one basketball. Unless you're going to, convince Cade, hey, play small forward and Ivy and Scoot are your point guard and shooting guard, maybe it could work. I don't know. That's next level thinking. But if you think it could work and just kind of figure it out later and see what happens, then yeah, you could try to do that. But like I said, I either want 1 or 3, man. I just don't want to.